Hello, I'm Austin Bradley and I'm doing my quick analysis on Michael J. Sandel's Chapter 1 in the book Justice Was the Right Thing to Do. Doing the right thing. There were 5 scenarios that Mr. Sandel acknowledged in his Chapter 1 analysis. Hurricane Charlie, awarding the Purple Heart to mentally incompetent veterans. The AIG and other big bank bailouts. The Navy SEAL situation with the Afghans. And the trolley situation. All those scenarios that were going on in this chapter, first of all, they explore what you would do, not just in the rational sense, but also the moral sense. Of course, in the moral sense, it can be quite complex. The Hurricane Charlie scenario of inflation. Inflation, having items that are costly for people to buy, I could understand if it would be just of a small amount, but if it had to be like double or triple the price, you could not have that too long because of economy. The economy would be in a recession or worse, a depression, if there had to be higher prices on goods because of natural disasters or certain events. I don't think they would really be necessary. Take, for instance, the Civil War, where the Confederate States had inflation on all of goods that they had, and as a result, that was partly their demise as well. And to have stuff to be too expensive for services and goods does not help anything out to be successful. The Purple Heart awardment for mentally ill or incapacitated veterans, they deserve a Purple Heart. Or if they do not deserve a Purple Heart, they need something close to it, because mental illness is pretty serious. And it can be healed or it may not be healed. With the PTSD and other types of diseases that are going on. Mentally ill veterans need respect, they need help. And I think the Purple Heart should really be applied for them if they had to really sacrifice their self on the front lines to do what they had to do for their service. Physical wounds may or may not heal, but that also applies to mental wounds and emotional wounds. And we did not tell them to be out there on the front lines to fight for us, but they did. They volunteered. And they need all the respect and credit that they deserve. And it is very sad that they cannot just get a decent recognition award for that. So I believe that the Purple Heart should be awarded to those if, when they had to put themselves on the line to do what they had to do and to be exemplary on it. The big bank bailouts. Using that taxpayer money to bail out the big banks, bad scenario on the government and as well as for the banks involved. Sure, they had to be bailed out or otherwise we would really be in a worse situation than a recession. And it is very innovative and provocative for the big banks to try to be too involved in what the government would be backed upon them for whatever services that they had to do to make their investments go up. Years before, they were making big on what maneuvers that they had to do, and the government helped them out on that somewhat with rules and regulations. However, when they had to do that with the big recession, they did not realize that there could be something like as big and catastrophic that could happen to them. Then that really set the government and the banks alike on high alert afterwards. And I hope that they still are. I don't know as of 2015 that the banks have paid all that $700+ billion to the government back. I know the car dealers, when they were in that situation, the car makers such as GM and Ford, all the American car makers, they did pay all of their debts back. to the government. So I was wondering if the banks have done the same thing, and I don't know if they have. So it's quite questionable. But they need to regulate that a little bit more than what they're doing. Otherwise, it would be in a depression mode, and it would be catastrophic for us economically and as well as society, like as well. For the trolley car situation and the Navy SEAL Luttrell and his crew having to go over there and try to situated. Those situations are out of one's control, and just like the previous scenarios which I talked about, they had to be made at that split second. They did not have the foreknowledge to know what would happen down the road, whether it was good or bad outcomes. They had to make that choice. And that's just the way it is with any kind of decisions you make. If you have to make the split second decision, that depends on how one would like to see the probable events. They have to make that split second decision. They cannot just blame themselves entirely for the rest of their life just because of the outcome. Sure, if they could change time, they would try to do better, but they had to make decisions at split second. That's what Captain Luttrell did. And same thing with the trolley car situation. I would be like Sergeant Vincent Carter and say, "Get out of the way, move it, move it, move it," before I would try to run over any one of those workers. And hopefully they wouldn't be deaf, so I hope they could hear me or the trolley coming. But if I had to make the choice about having to take one's life because of an unavoidable scenario like this, the less lives you would take, the better. So either run over the one worker to the curb or push over the fat guy or the obese guy over first to stop the trolley. Because really, you have to be logic to event any kind of further horror and sadness for the families of all those workers who would possibly be killed. But I hope that they wouldn't. But you have to be prepared. And I agree with Sandel's analysis of virtues, freedoms, and welfares for the country. That needs to be established for everyone and for every nation. Otherwise, you would be in a dystopia where all kinds of horror and ravishness would be upon you and everyone that you know around you. So that needs to be further demonstrated more. And I appreciate the writings. And those are my personal analysis and views of this chapter, or reflections, I should say, personal reflections. Thanks for watching. I hope this message finds everyone well.